Hi, I'm Hatu. Welcome to Asian Agribiz podcast. This podcast with Vincent Guyonnet is divided into two parts. In this first part, Arif Fahruddin and Dr. Guyonnet are discussing about opportunities and challenges of the egg industry in Southeast Asia. Dr. Guyonnet also shares his objective view about cage-free eggs. Dr. Guyonnet was the speaker of Asian Agribiz Layer Feed Quality Conference.
Hi, Vincent.
Good evening, Arif. How are you?
Good morning, Vincent. I'm good and doing very well. Thank you for being my podcast guest and accepting to talk about the opportunities and challenges in the egg industry in Southeast Asia.
Well, it's always a pleasure, and there is so many opportunities in Southeast Asia that I truly always enjoy talking about this topic for the region.
Before we dive deeper into the topic, our audience and I would love to hear the brief introduction about yourself and FFI Consulting.
Yes, so my name is Vincent Guyonnet, or Dr. Vincent, as I'm known in many countries in Asia. By training, I have a veterinary degree from France, and then I did a PhD in poultry science from the University of Georgia in the USA. And then I started my career working for Pfizer Animal Health, which is now Zoetis. And I spent a lot of time with the company in Southeast Asia, a lot of time in Malaysia, some in Indonesia, and so I truly enjoyed. And that was my first taste of Asia, and I was back in the early 1990s. And now I'm a manager of a consulting firm, FFI Consulting, which stands for Food and Feather International Consulting. So dealing with poultry, mostly eggs, and I work with a wide range of clients, being a large multinational corporation, producer organization from different countries, large and small farms, and also some NGOs, so non-governmental organization, especially when they deal with trying to improve human nutrition.
Okay, Vincent, I'm impressed with information and data you presented in an IEC webinar about the egg industries in some countries in Southeast Asia. We at Asian Agribiz observed that Southeast Asia is home for around 670 million people, where majority of the population are millennials and Generation Z. Although the average egg consumption per capita in the region is lower than developed countries, the room for egg consumption growth is big, attractive for existing egg producers and newcomers. In addition, lifestyle in the region is changing and awareness towards healthy life is growing. Tell us your perspective and observation about the opportunities of the egg industry in the region.
Okay, let's see, maybe one word, big. Big opportunities. That's the very quick summary, big opportunity. No, if you look at Asia, and I'm talking here the whole Asia region, it's 62% of the world production of eggs, okay? Now, granted, you have China by itself already 34% of the world production. So 62% of the world production in the region, and also 70% of the global growth of egg production is coming from Asia. So this is where the growth is. It is truly, truly amazing. So if we look at, and for data purpose, let's look at 5 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam. In that, in those 5 countries, those 5 countries represent 8.7% of the world production. Okay, and obviously with Indonesia being the biggest egg producer of those 5 countries. But more than that, the growth between 2009 and 2019, so over the past 10 years, based on the data available from the FAO. So Asia grew by 39%, but a country like Malaysia grew by 63%. And we can talk later about Malaysia. Malaysia is a very specific case. Philippines grew by 58%. Vietnam grew by 50%. The only country with a sort of rather slower growth compared to the region and the other countries is Thailand, with only a 16.8% growth over the past 10 years. So really growth, and it's growth everywhere. So hopefully we can talk about the different areas for growth, but really, if we have to put one word again, as I said, for opportunities in the region, I would say just big.
Interesting. Let's talk about the different areas for growth that you mentioned.
Okay, yeah. So, sorry. So one country, and I just mentioned that a minute ago, Malaysia has a different way of, I mean, first of all, it seems to me that in Malaysia already consumption is rather high. Again, most of the regions in Southeast Asia, but it's a global issue. We usually have poor data. Okay, Arif. So it's
Absolutely
very hard.
True.
It's very hard to analyze a market. It's very hard to grow a business if you don't have data, and good data. Data is the essence of generating growth. If you need to have good data about your consumers to target them, you need to have good data in terms of what is the actual consumption, so that you can also track and measure your progress. Okay, but so in most of the region, I use FAO data because that's the only data that is available, and the data is as good as the input of people providing the data to the FAO, right? So, and actually, in terms of data, I have a question, and hopefully maybe some listeners can help me understand the issue here. It's about Indonesia. You probably know, I think, Arif, we talked about it before. I asked you that question. In between 2016 and 2017, the production of eggs in Indonesia jumped by more than 3 million tons. Okay, that's about putting 175 million hens in production just not overnight, but in 12 months, which I don't think it happened. So my speculation is that the Indonesian government, the Central Bureau of Statistics, recalculated, reassessed the number of eggs produced, probably accounting for more production from smaller flocks, which are extremely hard to track, right?
Yeah.
And that's why earlier when I was talking about growth, I'm reluctant, or I don't know what to think about the production in Indonesia, because if you look at the past 10 years, the production increased by 343%. That's because in 1 year you had that huge spike, right?
Yeah.
So, but let's assume that Indonesia is indeed at a production of 4.75 million ton, which places Indonesia in number 4 position in the world. So Indonesia is a very special case. I was mentioning Malaysia. Malaysia, they basically build a lot of the growth for export market to Singapore. All right.
Yeah.
Malaysia, again, according to FAO data, when you analyze export import, about 15% of the production of Malaysia is geared towards export, which is mostly Singapore and most likely a little bit also for Hong Kong, for example. And then if we look at growth opportunities, you have, so in the world, on average, if you take the whole global egg production, the world population, the consumption is about 180 eggs per person per year, right?
Yeah.
And you have huge variation. We know in Mexico, they're around 370 eggs per person per year, so more than 1 per day. And then you also have the African continent, where the continent itself, as a whole, so which is about 1.6 billion people, I believe, they consume only 44 eggs per year. And then within the region, so we have let's see, in Indonesia, based on those numbers, that would be, my calculation is around 292 eggs per person. But then the Philippines is 89. Vietnam is 70 eggs per person per year. So again, if you could just bring the Philippines or Vietnam to the level that we have in Indonesia, for example, that's an additional 150 eggs per person. You have countries with around 105 million people. It's huge. It's huge. So really, it's great opportunity. Now, how can we get that growth? How can we convince, and especially you mentioned earlier, the Gen Z, the younger generation. So a number of things, I think. First of all, COVID, the pandemic, any crisis, financial crisis, always help the egg sector, because the egg is one of the best and cheapest animal protein source, right? So we all know that when people have less money to spend on food, they will consume less beef, less, more expensive meat, and they will eat more chickens and more eggs. And we've seen that. I mean, even in rich countries, there was an increase in egg consumption, in shell egg. Okay. So pandemic helped a bit, because now people are sort of short for money, and they would spend on the eggs, which is excellent source of protein and a good price. On the other side, obviously Southeast Asia is booming. Indonesia growth, I don't know, I've got the numbers, but it's amazing, right? It's fast growing. You have a more affluent, middle income population growing and growing. And obviously, when you have a base of 270 million people in Indonesia, even say 10% of people are rich, that's 27 million. It's the size of a number of countries like Belgium, 27 million. It's slightly less than Canada, but not that far. So with rising level of income, there's a tendency of seeing people switching from cheaper animal protein to more expensive one, right? So which means that people could go from chicken to beef to pork when religion allows them to do so. So there's that shift. So the challenge also for the egg sector will be to make sure that the Gen Z with a rising level of income will also still think of the egg as a great source of nutrition, of protein, and not go for beef, mutton, or other type of meat. So that's why it's so important to always advertise, communicate, especially to Gen Z. Gen Z are spending a lot of time on social media.
True.
There is a lot of information and misinformation on social media. So we need to be sure that they receive the right information about the egg sector or the poultry sector in general, or even animal production sector, so that people understand what we do, what is our job, how we care for the animals, the well-being and welfare of our birds is our primary concern. So therefore, they think of the egg as a great source of protein, and also that we explain what we do.
Agree with you. And I think campaigns about egg consumption with all good information that you just mentioned to block all the misinformation to millennials and Gen Z is really important. I saw that in Thailand, an association is trying to include eggs in the lunch menu in schools. do you have ideas how Southeast Asian countries can have effective campaigns to increase egg consumption? Maybe some examples from developed countries that you have.
Oh, yes, I do. And actually, if you allow me, Arif, that's sort of part of my job. That's why my company is working with the local producer, with producer organization to boost, production and consumption. It's extremely important. So first of all, I think maybe that's because of the language barrier. Maybe I don't understand for sure, but my feeling is that in most of the region, we do not have extremely strong producers organization. Okay.
True.
Because this is truly the key to the success, is having a strong producer organization. Why? Well, too often what I see around the world, anywhere, but we have producers, so companies, fighting against companies to gain market share, right?
That's true.
So they fight each other rather than pool resources together and advertise the egg as a great food product, so that now together they grow the size of the market. Okay, so maybe to illustrate, make sure that the audience understand, if right now the market size is 100, in too many countries, people fight for that 100. Okay,
yeah.
But if they were to combine resources together, that 100 would suddenly grow to 300. So the market is bigger. And now they can fight, but they fight for 300 rather than fight for 100, right?
Yeah.
So great examples. I mean, and I love that example first because I work with them, so I know the detail, and it's also a market that is probably more similar to Southeast Asian countries than the more Western or North American countries. Countries I'm talking about, it's Colombia. In South America. FENAVI, it's the association, the Federation of National, Producers. They have a very strong organization that deals with both eggs and broiler chicken, but they have different groups and they care for egg producers and for broiler producers. And over the past 15 years, that country has invested resources that they gather from all the members. So all the members contribute money, and that money is being used to have advertising program about the eggs. So they have TV campaign, advertising, print advertising campaign. They have a whole approach that has helped grow the consumption of eggs. In the past 15 years, from memory, I think they probably went from 195 eggs per person, and last year they were at 325.
Wow.
Okay, so more than 120 eggs in addition in 15 years, and all that by creating a strong organization that communicate, strong messages and so forth. So why do we need to advertise for egg? Too many people often think, an egg is an egg. It's simple. Everybody knows an egg. That's true.
Yeah.
But I would also say, well, everybody knows, and sorry, I hope I'm allowed to mention brands. Everybody knows Coca-Cola, the drink, right? Everybody knows Nike, the sports and shoes maker, right?
Yeah.
But yet you see them advertised all the time on TV or on billboard and so forth, right? Why? Well, because you need to constantly remind people of your product.
Yeah.
And so the consumers, when they go to the stores, they're going to buy eggs. If you always tell them, an egg is good for you, this is time for your egg, or, those type of messages. If you don't, well, when the consumers have options and the consumers have options, they're going to buy something else. So again, we need to always remind consumers, eat an egg, buy an egg. So that's why. So strong organizations are going to be able to advertise, promote the egg as as I don't like the word, well, commodity as a product itself, right? And then producers, companies after that can fight for their own brand. So my brand of eggs or his brand of eggs, rather than fight for the current market, they need to grow the market. So that's the role of egg producers organization. And for that, you need money. So that means, all producers need to contribute to have a means of generating, cash, so that cash can be used for market research. Again, we talked earlier about data. It's so important to understand your consumers, know what will make them react, what will make them buy the product. Sorry. So that's why market research is a key element of a successful marketing campaign. You need to understand what is going to work before you spend a lot of money on TV advertising and print media, for example.
Agree.
So there is a lot that can be done, and it works. Again, Colombia is an example. Canada, well, slightly different from Southeast Asia, but Canada also is a good example, because you may say, well, this is a rich country. That's true. People have a lot of different opportunities for animal protein consumption. Here, there's no restriction about pork, so you can have pork, beef, fish, whatever, all opportunities are available. So what you need is really always remind consumers that, an egg for you is good. And that's what the organization, the National Organization of Egg Producers, has been doing also. And they had a growth in egg consumption also for the past 15 years. So many opportunities, but they do not happen by themselves. So you need to trigger, you need to push, you need to advertise. So my number one, I think, recommendation in the region for those countries is for the producers, and especially, the larger one needs to take the lead. They need to unify in creating those national organizations so that they can carry the message to the consumers on nationwide basis about egg and good nutrition. Otherwise, other type of animal protein may take the place.
Yeah. So we in Southeast Asia need a good collaboration of egg producers, and two, a never-ending promotion about eggs. Interesting.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back to the 5 countries you mentioned. You already explained about Indonesia and Malaysia. What about the Philippines, Vietnam, and Thailand? We see in the Philippines and Vietnam a lot of new investments in new layer farms with modern housing and equipment for the housing system. What's your observation?
And I think they're right. If I could, I would invest also in those countries. I mean, if you look at, again, I was checking numbers, Philippines, 108 million people, Vietnam, 96 million people. That's huge population, by global standards. And Philippines, 89 eggs per person, Vietnam, 70. I mean, right there, it tells me I have a huge market potential, and I have a low egg consumption in a region that is typically, an egg-loving region, right?
Yeah.
So it should not be that difficult to really reap the benefit of the investment and production. And what you mentioned makes me very, happy that they're investing in good equipment, good farming, good housing system, because another way of success is also getting, economies of scales.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you buy 10 tons of feed, it's going to cost you less per ton of feed than if you buy only 500 kilos at a time, because you have a very small flock, right? So bigger farms, economies of scale, better management, better productivity, better results, more eggs, for the same amount of feed that you give the hens, so you get much more productivity and efficiencies of production. So this is great. And now, granted, and let's be careful, because I've seen that too often, People invest in new housing system, in production, and they don't invest in building consumption. Okay. Wow. Let's go back to what we just discussed a minute ago. Let's do not assume that because you're going to produce more and eggs are going to be more available, that people are going to eat them. We need to advertise. So too often, a program, a plan could fail because, yeah, you produce more eggs, but consumers still don't buy them. They don't know what to do with them. And you'd be surprised how often many organizations, national organization of producers, spend a lot of money getting recipes, advertising about how to cook with an egg, what to do with them, because obviously you have the egg as a breakfast, fried egg, poached egg, and so forth. But there's so many other things that you can do with an egg, right? And you need to constantly remind consumers, give them some ideas to try new recipes, to try this and try that. So in the Philippines and Vietnam, people investing in new buildings and larger scale farms, great, I would say, but please do not forget, and come to see me if you need help, do not forget to invest also in the consumption part of the business, okay?
Yeah.
Production is one side, but building consumption is also another key element of the success.
And really important.
Yeah, but I'm very happy. But having said that, also, you can be a big egg producing country without necessarily having huge farms, right? We all know, the example of China. China became the #1 egg producing country in 1984. And for many, many years, almost more than 30 years, the average size of each farm was less than 5,000 hens. So they were able to produce massive amount of eggs with very small farms. Now, granted, now it's changed. The past 10 years, we see a total change in China, and now you have a few companies already. Well, you have one company, the Qingyuan, DQI, in the top 10 with 20 million birds. You have two others, Sun Deli Farm in Sichuan and another one in the top 25, and they were not there last year. So really, it's also a trend. It is changing. But good news is that even in countries where you cannot invest in massive, large farms, you can still achieve great results and be extremely productive.
Okay. What about Thailand? We see this market is more advanced than other countries like Indonesia, the Philippines and Vietnam in terms of more brands for value-added eggs, and then the first adopter also for cage-free eggs. What's your observation?
Thailand is a bit of a special case. As we saw earlier, Thailand has grown less than the other countries. Probably Thailand has more eggs, branded eggs than others. They probably have a more sophisticated egg processing business than the rest of the region. And they may be there are differences, I think, in Thailand. Thailand, the consumption by my own calculation is around 168, so there's still room to grow. But compared to, I think, Indonesia, in Thailand, there's suddenly more options in terms of animal protein, with pork being an option, right? Which is whereas in both Indonesia and the Philippines, that's an advantage for the egg, right? Is that there's really a very or no religious sort of guidance that you cannot eat eggs, so which is great, right?
Yeah.
So, and Thailand is very strong, as we know, for broader production and processing of poultry, right? So it's a big export market and so forth. So Thailand may be more advanced in the degree of sophistication, both in terms of processing and production, and you have some big giants. We all know one, right? CP, but there's others. And maybe there's that effect of a dominant giant that sort of affect the evolution of the market.
Okay. Okay, after talking about opportunities, let's talk about the key challenges that you observe. You already mentioned one about the importance of continuously providing good information about eggs to the Gen Z and millennials. What are the other key challenges?
Yeah, well, certainly, I mean, nothing new here, sadly enough. I think for the past 20 years, it's been always the challenge for the world, but especially in Southeast Asia, is these diseases, and especially, avian influenza.
Correct.
So you need to always make sure that we respect good biosecurity measures. We have the best practices on farm. And typically, I've seen in many Asian countries some very good practices, good processes. Again, because the region has been plagued with a number of diseases, so people have learned that they really have to look after that part of the business. So, but continue to invest in training of the employees, in providing them with the right tools to do a good job. It can be as simple as providing them boots or shoes that they leave on the farm and that they use when they work on the farm, or providing the clothing. That's something I always recommend, buy them the clothing, have a washing machine on the farm, wash the clothes for them. So therefore, that they have clean clothes all the time when they come and they go in your barns. So sometimes investment of biosecurity is not that expensive.
Correct.
It's just that we need to do it. And if you don't make it easy for the employees to follow the rules, then they're not going to follow the rules. So if you say clean clothes, good shoes, buy them. Buy the shoes and have them available to them on the farm. They stay on the farm, they're always available, or mask or hairnet, all those different things, uniforms. And big companies typically would do that. Smaller companies maybe not, and that's where you can have problems. So avian influenza and diseases is an issue.
Yeah.
The other one, and you briefly, and it's a bit related to Gen Z and social media, it's all the issues around animal welfare. Okay.
Let's talk about it.
And animal welfare is a very complicated topic, because you have one side of animal welfare, if you wish, it's animal health, it's the well-being of the animal, it's the quality of the air, of the environment, it's the proper nutrition and so forth. And then you have another element of welfare, which is very big in Europe. It's and now in North America, it's the quality of life of the animal. Okay. And there is no easy way to either measure the quality of life, but also there's no easy way to define what is the quality of life of a laying hen. The laying hen cannot tell us that, okay? Laying hen, through studies, research that is being done, we know that laying hens will like to have perches, we like to have a nest box to lay the egg, but we don't know sort of how much what quality of life means for them. So therefore, the decision of quality of life is made by people. Okay, and people in North America, in France, in Canada, in the US, or in Indonesia, in the Philippines, are going to have different values. True. Right? We're not all equal. Yes. We're not all the same. We don't think the same, and which is great. Otherwise, we'll have a boring world. So, so that's the challenge here, is that in mostly, and NGOs are mostly coming from rich, developed countries where people have enough to eat, right?
Yeah,
and have slightly different values than what we may have, and different values and constraints and issues than what we have in Southeast Asia. So they basically impose a lot of their belief, their values on others. And to me, that's the biggest challenge, making sure that, I'm all for certainly better health, better housing condition for the laying hens? Yes. But the quality of life is, how do you define it? And there's no gold standard, right? So therefore it's somebody's belief versus another person's belief. And the more vocal is going to win, the more so the more activist, the more forceful is going to have the opinion that will take the lead. So to me, that's the challenge. So how can we prevent having certain NGOs sort of push the egg production to maybe cage-free or whatever system? And I think we should later on talk about, cage-free and the impact in both on the health of the animal, but also on the health of the planet from a sustainability standpoint. But so if, how can we prevent that? Again, I would say, first of all, I like also to say that, some of those activists or NGOs have helped the egg sector improve its management and processes. So that's great. If you look at 20, 30 years ago, all the birds were in the conventional cage system.
Yeah.
Now, through research, we know that the hens, we like to perch, we like to have a nest area and so forth. So I think, to me, like what we call the enriched cage or the furnished cage, those new type of cages where you have perches and nest box, for example, are a good compromise to answer some of the needs for the birds. So if I were a producer in Asia, I would start thinking of those type of new housing system, because they are better for the birds and we still have excellent production results, right?
Yeah.
So fighting or sort of to defend the sector in front of those NGOs, one of the key elements for me is to be, transparent and communicate and go to the consumers, explain how we do our job, why we do it. Again, we didn't put the birds in cages because we are cruel. People old enough remember that, in the 50s, 60s, that was before I was born, but still, I read some books. We know that, birds, there was a high mortality, 15, 20%, because birds were on the floor, right? Yeah. And then suddenly we say, well, if we put them in cages, they will be removed from contact with the feces. There will be less coccidiosis and other type of diseases, and mortality went down. And then we had better vaccines and all those things. So really, birds move from the floor to cages for health reasons, and now we want to go back. So really, we need to explain the advantages and disadvantages of each system. I believe, and there's lots of data that can demonstrate that too, is that there is currently no ideal system. If somebody is telling us that cage-free is the best system, or is the ideal system, sorry, I would say this is not true. There are some benefits. So the birds are more freedom, they can go, they can move, they can fly. But there's also, if you've been, and I'm sure some maybe some auditors have been or not, but if you go inside an aviary system, so birds are cage free, and you have maybe 20,000 birds, the environment is extremely dusty.
Wow.
Okay, and sometimes you have a high level of ammonia. So now you have the challenge of, what do you think the hen prefers? To be able to move around and fly, but live 24 hours a day in an environment that is extremely dusty and with high level of ammonia? Or would the hen prefer to be in a cage with 6 friends and have a much cleaner air quality and a very low level of ammonia? So it's not that simple. But if you listen to NGOs, to animal welfare activists, for them the welfare is just behavior, okay, which is wrong. Welfare is a portfolio of things. It's a number of elements. Behavior is one, but Health is a big one too, right?
Yeah.
Absence of mortality is a big one. Quality of the environment is one. Nutrition is one. All those elements, all those famous five freedoms. So, but they focus only on behavior, and they don't focus on the others. So I think that's the challenge. So we need to talk to consumers, knowing that also consumers typically don't care. Even in Western countries, even in North America, the average consumers has no idea and no interest. Okay, it's only NGOs that sort of steer the pot and create the commotion, create a big noise, and they say consumers want this, and they go to big companies. Again, not to mention company brands, but they go to McDonald's, Subway, they go to large retail stores, Carrefour, Walmart, all those, and they say, okay, you need to have cage-free eggs only because first it's cruelty for the birds, and the consumers, that's what they want. They want cage-free eggs, which is not necessarily true, but that. So, sorry.
Yeah.
So as producers, we need to go and talk to those companies first before the NGOs tell them their own story. We all also need to explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I'm hoping that in Southeast Asia, first, the animal welfare movement is still nascent. We also deal with a region where there's still a lot of people that don't have enough to eat. So hopefully the welfare of human being is considered slightly above the welfare of hens, in terms of, we need to make sure that first people get enough food, and getting enough food, it may mean that you need to have birds in a cage. And if we have the bird in cage, maybe we need to consider those new type of cages that answer some of the needs of the birds.
Thank you for listening to the first part of this podcast. Don't miss the second part, which will be streamed next week. And don't forget to subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts.